Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club. I'm Ray
Um,
Sidney-Smith,
I'm Augusto Pinaud.
and we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 93093 for January 10th, 2022. Google is looking to Apple's ecosystem Playbook in 2022, and of course, the productivity and related technology news this week. So, welcome everybody to those listening and watching live, and to those listening to the replay or to the podcast episode afterward. As you all know, each week, Augusto and I review and discuss the productivity and technology news headlines of the week. And we start that out with talking about the productivity blogosphere and audiosphere, the blogs and podcasts that we've come across that we thought were worth sharing with you all. Augusto, what is our first story this week?
So we are beginning this week with an article that's titled from 43.me, How Can I Increase Personal Productivity at Home and at Work? And, I've been thinking about this and I'm even writing an article. I begin my life and my professional life as a road warrior, or what was called right there a road warrior. I don't know what that's called anymore, but I basically travel and I was rarely in my office and I live on a bag. And there are certain habits that I still carry for that. My office, even that I don't travel, is still on that bag. Okay? That make me, if I travel, I just grab my bag and can go. Everything is in there, sorted in little bags. What is interesting is with all this COVID, working from home, coming partial to the office, and all these things, a lot more people may have not realized that they are going to be more similar to that image of the road warrior that what they were with their image of what they work before all the pandemic. And it is important for people to understand how can you increase that productivity not only at home but at work for your career. Okay, as you are going to be working home, you're going to be working remotely, cafes, whatever, but also how do you increase personal productivity for the other side. And I always said you need to look at both sides of that coin. Your career is one of the elements, not the only element. It's the reason I really enjoy this article. This article brings 7 tips for how to improve that, adopt a system and to manage both your personal and your work task. We have been talking about systems for a really long time, using your system, record task on an app, on a notebook. Once you have recorded, your daily, your monthly tasks go to review. And we both subscribe to the Getting Things Done methodology by David Allen. So we try to do that once a week. Resist the temptation to multitask or to become distracted. Reward yourself for completing daily tasks, and embed the habit of updating your task regularly. And again, it was a simple article, but what I like was is we are finally starting to talk about, okay, this is a reality. You need to be productive on both places. You are not coming back to only be on one or the other for most people. So,
Fantastic. On to our next article from Trello. This is Trello's blog.
yes, and 5 ways to reinvigorate and level up your office. They talk about, you know, take care of your back. One of the things is still to this day, most people are working in their living room table, in the couch, in a chair, but not necessarily an ergonomic chair. So take care of your back, raise the screens, light up your working space, and get a video call makeover that I think it will be really good later on as we get to the tools. And finally, get organized and create a vibe. Make the office a place that you enjoy. I still love my nephew. The first time my nephew coming, we moved from Indiana to New Jersey in 2000, and My nephew lives in New Jersey. Says the first time he walks into my office after we have moved and saw my desk, okay, I still laughed because his reaction was, "Cool, can I play Minecraft on all those screens?" And it was really cool. But at the same time, when I look at that, yeah, that's I have an office that is really comfortable for what I do, and I've been working for years into tweak here and tweak there. How can I make it better? And I have, monitors. The monitor I'm talking right now, the camera I'm talking right now, is here, so I don't need to work like this while I'm talking. So make your office comfortable, create a vibe, and create really your dream office. You're working at home, make it something cool.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that it's not just the ergonomics, it's also air quality, light qualities, the color psychology of the space, and making sure that, it smells the way you want it to without putting, carcinogens into the air that you're going to be breathing in, or just particulate matter. But the idea here is to make it a space for all of your senses, all of your biological needs. That's going to make it, functional for you. And I appreciated their perspective on that. All right, on to the article from Yahoo Finance. Omicron has exposed corporate leaders' lack of vision about remote work.
And, oh, there is no lack of vision. We're just going to postpone again, once again, the coming back to the office. And I understand why corporations feel that they need to bring people back in, but it's been 2 years. And the reality is, even if you say tomorrow, okay, we don't care anymore, or a COVID disappear, people back to the office, people has changed for good or for bad. Okay, working from home and working remotely, even on the way they do their work, all that has changed. So corporate will also need to update. And so far, it seems like they don't want that vision of remote work, even that remote work is what has been moving corporations for the last 2 years. And I've been hearing recently people say, well, as soon as we go back, people even who were hired remotely, as soon as we are starting to come back, you are going to need to start coming back to the office. And some of these people is like, no, 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 no. You hire me remotely from day one. I'm not coming back. So what is going to happen with that? I don't know. But again, I agree with the article. It seems like many of these leaders of these corporations are ignoring the fact. What make it even worse is that they are not planning to come back. Many of them are not planning are planning to stay remote. So you are going to tell the employees to come back so you can continue doing Zoom and everything else.
Yeah,
See what happens.
aside from that bit of hypocrisy, I'm not willing to indict. I'm not going to indict all CEOs or executives with the ostrich effect, which is the whole concept of sticking your head in the sand. Which, by the way, ostriches do not do out of fear. It's a myth. But the idea here is that what we want to do is to recognize the companies that are being appropriate with their employees and who are innovating in the space and are capable of adapting to a changing environment. Those companies will do better because they will have less attrition. They will be able to bring on more talent and better talent than their competitors. And those businesses that choose to be staid and stale in the markets will eventually crumble and die. And that's, I mean, if you believe in market forces and capitalism, that is what's supposed to happen. So like I'm less concerned about companies that are going to go under because they're forcing their employees to do this or that, as opposed to empowering their employees and supporting their employees in being productive. And I think that's the turn that I care about. That's the pivot point that I care about. Are you supporting your organization's ability to affect its mission? And that means making sure your human resources, your labor resources are effective, and that means they're supported? Or are you trying to change things on them so that they don't feel supported and therefore will want to leave you and go someplace where they will feel supported, right? And so I'm not willing to indict an entire group of people. I am going to say that strategically we will know That is, granularly, we will know the companies that have failed to adopt and adapt, because they will be the ones who fail in the future. And if they do stick around, then that also is just a fact of potentially us looking at it from a governmental perspective and how legislation should fix things so that those employees don't suffer. Because it's just, at the end of the day, we know that when there are corporate regulations, not ones that are too much on people, but productivity flourishes when we give employees greater capabilities, when they give them greater authority, greater responsibility, and the ability to flourish in a space. And so we may have to put a little bit of our governmental clutches on the companies in order to be able to force them to give autonomy and responsibility to employees in that sense. So we'll see. I mean, we're dealing with many different countries, many different governments, many different ways in which we
Filters and
can.
variables, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. All right, on to our next article. Progress isn't linear.
This was a really good reminder, and it's been 2 years. We are going to our third year, at least 2.5, of changing. And people still want to see progress, and some people want to see, when we're going to go back to normal. Well, it is important to remember that the progress you are making may not be linear. It is, the graph says that there's a point in the article that says, it looks more like a graph, and the graph is up and down, up and down, up and down. And progress is like that. As I was reviewing my 2021, from a certain perspective, it looks like, okay, it was terrible. But from another perspective, when you look really into, there were things that were really well, there were things that were not that well. But at the end of the day, there was progress. There was ups, there was downs. That's part of progress, but there was progress. And it's important to remember, and do not get discouraged when progress doesn't go on that straight line that we draw. As a person who has write more than 7 books and is finishing the number 8, you write the books and you come with this idea, oh yes, it's going to be this. And even you sometimes make this silly outline, oh, this is going to be the index, okay? And you start typing, and it's not exactly how it goes. But it is important that, remember, even if the progress is not linear, you can see the progress. Just stop, look. Even when you feel that you hit a wall and that you dip, that is still progress. When I coach people, I tell people who come to me and ask me, well, this seems like the same problem I've been dealing over and over and over. And I said, yes, but stop for a second and remember, the person that is dealing with that problem is not the same one who dealt with that problem the last time. You have grown, you have progressed, and the person who is doing it now, it's a different one.
Yeah, I think of like a ball ricocheting, right? If it's moving in a vertically, it's making progress toward a point, right? Some kind of locus, then it's making forward progress. And that's what we care about more so than the up and down, right? That vertical movement is not as important as the forward movement or the horizontal movement toward an end. And yes, you're going to have some deviations from a straight line. Yes, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. When in life are you able to really truly draw a straight line, right?
Mm-hmm.
To any goal? We have to be willing to be aware of the derivations. And more important than that, I think that what I call the progress imperative, right? Which is, progress is perfection, but perfection is not progress. And when you think about that perspective, that any progress moving forward towards something, you have to think about that as perfection in the world. And the more you dwell on that idea that one is the other, but not the reverse, then you start to get the idea that progress is actually the imperative here. And when we make progress, it's not always going to be what we call perfection, but it is the imperative that we must flow from, right? We must make progress. And if we think about progress as perfection, then the opposite is not true. And I know there's some mathematicians out there who are having heart attacks with me saying that. But that's just the way I see it, right? Like if you can think of all of the ways in which you dislike your spouse or partner, right? But you still love them. You love them despite their failings, their shortcomings, and that is what love is, right? I think the same about progress. Progress is, in spite of you being a perfectionist or having perfectionist tendencies, making progress is so important toward the ends that you want, and that's the part of life that's kind of like mealy, but it's also the part of life that makes things kind of exciting and fun. So that's a kind of long-winded way of saying uh, lean into progress. And it doesn't matter if it's linear or straight or whatever, just lean into progress, one foot in front of the other, and you'll make progress happen. All right. Our next article is all about slow work. And this actually was interesting because Panasonic actually recently announced, like Microsoft did in 2019, that they were going to be offering their Japanese employees a 4-day work week. And so in kind of in light of that, and the fact that we just actually published on Productivity Cast an episode all about the 4-day work week and its impact on productivity, we come to this article on the case for slow work. And Augusto, you want to give us kind of a background in terms of what is going on here?
The article tells story somebody at the beginning of their career and how
Paige Curtis.
Corporate.
Paige Curtis is her name.
Yeah, and how we need to make a case for slow down in research, in medicine, in travel, in food, and in work. There is more people working more hours to what? And by the way, it's good that I said guilty as charged, because I work a significant amount of hours. The question is where are you in that? And I've been famously for mention that book that I co-wrote, with my friend Michael Slewinski, the iPad only book. And every time he needed to slow down, aka take the siesta in Spain, okay, it was driving me crazy. But are we in the journey of speed up, or are we journeying or enjoying the things? And this article really made me think on, as much of the things I do, which ones are the one that I still enjoy and taste, and which ones are the ones that is like, okay, I'm done with this. It's maybe time that I delegate or eliminate or whatever it is to be doing. Because for me, a slowdown is about enjoyment, is nothing else. Okay? In work, in food, in whatever. So the article has a quote, says, slow down invite us to shut down low value tasks and prioritize the impactful work that actually move the needle. I agree with that definition. So again, what are we trying to do with the tasks? And I said this is with clients, and when coaching clients, is, are you trying to mark stuff done to get them out of the list, or you're trying to mark stuff done because those will move the projects forward? And there is a really important distinction. And I think that idea of a slow work is about that. It's about what are those tasks that are going to really move you forward, and it is worth it to do the other ones. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm challenged by the term slow work, and just as I am perturbed by the notion of deep or shallow work. And but the semantics aside, I very much appreciate what Paige Curtis is talking about here, and the fact that the idea of deliberate work, let's call it deliberate work, similar or akin to deliberate practice, the idea of deliberate work done methodically and consistently toward a quality outcome, working for excellence, not for checking off a box. And as she noted in the article, the motto of Facebook, now Meta, talking about moving fast and breaking things. That is a very technocentric and a very startup friendly concept, but it also happens not to be the way in which we all should work, want to work. I am not one of those people. I like to work in a deliberate way. My work is deliberate and it's not necessarily slow. I might work more slowly on some things and faster on others. I tend to think slowly and move fast, and so I like the middle ground there, so to speak, right? Former Buddhist. I like the middle ground, and so we think about this concept of all of this, and she actually ends with a very salient thought here that I really appreciate. She goes, quote, "Now I'm grounded by the fact that rest is not a reward that needs to be earned. Rest and leisure time allow us to show up fully for every part of our lives." End
Mhm.
quote. And this really drives home a point, I think, about the kind of the whole paradigm here, which is that we should be all working ourselves to death because we're akin to machines. We are not. We are the at least undeterred champions of this planet. We are the apex creatures on this planet so far, and we should command it as such. We should be able to have the true concept of liberalism, free life, and we should be able to uh, do things that are going to really truly progress society forward. And we spend a lot of time doing things that are, I think, less than what we should be doing standards wise to be moving all of us forward as opposed to just a few of us forward. And I think that's a really poignant statement that she makes, that it's not some kind of like reward for things. You can think of this as a fundamental right. We have a right to exist. We have a right to rest and leisure time. And I think that ultimately actually makes us more productive. People don't think about it from that perspective, but making sure we're mentally and physically well is found fundamental to us being productive. And yet for some reason we do all of these things to kind of eke away at our fundamental ability to do that, to take care of ourselves in this way. All right, next and last article in our productivity articles.
So the last article we have in here is the 5 areas of personal growth and how to improve them. And the 5 areas are self-awareness, control, acceptance, knowing yourself, not knowing, and not knowing. And you know, as I was reading this, it made me coming back to the beginning, and maybe because today was one of those days where you go to beginnings. That's the conversation started at work today. But I can see how much progress, not linear, but how much progress. Okay, my self-awareness, my control, my acceptance, and my knowing, myself, and more importantly, how to understand what I don't know, what is the limits of my knowledge, and be okay with some of that. There was a time in my life that if I found stuff that I didn't know, I needed to go immediately deep into try to figure it out. And well, to a certain extent, that has changed. I'm okay finding now somebody who knows, and, and it's good. Um, so it
So
was a really good article. If again, it was an article that I enjoyed. How you look at these things, but more importantly, it was an article for me to reflect how I have worked on those 5 areas in the last years.
yeah, I thought this was really good. And my commentary on this is that if you just put self in front of most of these items, you become better aware of what this author is really talking about, right?
Mhm.
So from self-awareness, like the concept really for me bleeds a lot into the knowing yourself part. But either way, self-awareness, self-control, right? Coming from a well noted control freak. I am very well aware that I like to be in control, but self control then becomes an issue of regulation, right? Whether that be emotional regulation or self control being controlling my own desire to want to hold on to things too tight, right? If you squeeze a plum too tight, you're gonna crush it, right? And so you have to have just the right amount of of grip and dexterity when it comes to something like that. And that's kind of how life is. Self-acceptance, right? Like you don't have to necessarily accept everyone and everything in your world, but certainly accepting yourself, I think, is an appropriate thing here. That's what comes to mind. Knowing thyself, and knowing yourself, cogito ergo sum. The idea that you would get to know yourself so that you can one elevate your strengths and minimize those things that are weaknesses. I think that's just a basic component there. And then ultimately not knowing, being comfortable with not knowing. There's a very popular comedian who talks about the idea of he does a little bit in one of his comedy routines about Google and the idea that people are just no longer comfortable with not knowing because they can just Google everything. But there are there are these wonderful outgrowths of not knowing things and working, thriving and striving and struggling to get to knowing. And there's the famous Rainer Maria Rilke poem, and he talks about this idea that sometimes we cannot know the answers to things, but that we live into the answers, right? We can't answer all our questions, but we can live into the answers, meaning that there's a good amount of time where we struggle with not knowing, and part of the not knowing is the striving to somehow know, but living is the answer. And I can always appreciate that in some way, shape, or form. All right, we have reached the top of our productivity articles, and we are roughly about midway through the show. And so at this point, we're going to take a break and hear for a word from our sponsor this week, which is, of course, Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club. And when we get back, we are going to cover the headlines for our technology articles. We're going to cover our business and finance segment, do our productivity resources of the week, and then we are going to close out with a discussion on our featured story. And so we will see you after the break.
While working in person may be normal for you, it's unlikely your coworkers are as interested in being productive as you are. Or working remotely or from home can be isolating. And there's something powerful about being with productive people, even virtually, that helps you be more engaged. If a flavor of these sounds familiar, Co-working Space by Personal Productivity Club is for you. Co-working Space is a virtual work community designed to help members be more effective and efficient in their work and personal lives. At its core, we provide goal tracking and host focused action sessions throughout the week for accountability and camaraderie. Visit anythingbutidle.com/coworking to learn more. Co-working Space lives inside Personal Productivity Club, a digital community for personal productivity enthusiasts, so you can find people who use methods and tools you do too. Again, head over to anythingbutidle.com/coworking to see how Co-working Space can help you be more productive. And now, back to our show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith, joined, of course, with Augusto Pinaud for the second half of the show, where we are going to be talking about productivity-related technology articles in this section. Go for it, Augusto. What's our first article?
So last week we talked about Shift playgrounds and how
Swift.
What I said? Swift playgrounds, and how Apple was finally letting iPad users to code and to create apps. And during the week, I then found a second or a next article talking about the first app, or the first to-do app, at least I picked one on productivity, written with Swift playgrounds, and it's already on the Apple Store. The app is called To Don't. And basically, it's for you to pick things that you want to do or don't want to do. That is fun. But again, what I wanted to bring it is because it is all designed into this. It's all designed into Swift, and I thought that was interesting. Our next article is about Telegram, and we love Telegram, you and I at least. And they update their reactions. And now when you pick certain reactions, you get the animation, same as you get with some of the iOS. I'm not familiar with how Google do that, but the iOS, at least when you are iOS to iOS, you get those animations.
You do have them, and you have them in Google Messages. Okay. But to kind of explain to folks, so you can basically long press on a a specific message from someone else, and then you get a little prompt that will give you a tray. If you swipe left or right on that tray, you'll see the various emoji reactions that are capable. Now, this is only for one-to-one messages or groups in which the administrator has turned on reactions for those groups. So you may be in a group or a channel where that may not be possible, and I think that's why. The interesting thing is that if you just double tap now on a reaction, at least in the mobile app, it will automatically do a thumbs up. And there's, at least for me, there's a really fun kind of animated thing where a bunch of stuff like pours out and kind of shows you the animation. That's kind of fun. So I've been enjoying the reactions in Telegram. And just FYI, going back to Don't, this task list app built in Swift 4 on iPad, the app itself is currently, it's got 5 stars, 4 ratings of 5 out of 5 stars on the App Store. So that's pretty good, considering it's a brand new application. So weird icon for the app, some kind of cat, angry, and there being a little no there. So, but either way, good on them for building that out. Okay, next article.
So we have been talking about e-readers, e-tablets for a while. I am really intrigued by them. And our next article from Goodreader is the top 3 readers GUIs Google Play. So that you can access the Google Play Store and you can install things. And they mention, the Dansun, the non-e-reader, the Voil, and the Onyx books. The Onyx books in particular, I was looking, I know somebody who got it. It is pretty solid. And what was for me to mention in here, these are, they are e-ink, or decent enough to be an e-reader and really a tablet or a light tablet to use. But again, I remember when the first Kindle came out and people said, oh, why we want to use that? Well, this iPad is my notebook. It's on the side of my machine. This is what I do, take notes. And even that I deactivate the colors so I don't get distracted by the colors, I will love to get this into e-ink instead of what it is. So I think there is a lot of future for this. That's what I have to say about this.
Yeah, I really like the Onyx, the books or books. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I think it's books. Books Note Air 2. It's a 10.3-inch eNote tablet, an e-ink tablet. It's a really nice device. Yeah. I mean, so I'm really curious about the ability for e-ink devices, which is a unique part of our personal productivity technology market, really taking hold. We have already the Remarkable 2, which is pretty much the dominant player right now in the US market. Most people know about the Remarkable 2 if they're paying attention to the e-ink space. And then you have Kindles, which are basically non writing devices, mm-hmm. non-tablet devices for the reading experience. I think there's a lot of room to grow here. And as we continue to watch the coverage on this, I will be curious to see how the next few years really pan out for e-ink displays as they get better, their refresh rates get better, and that means their lifespan, their ability to last on battery for much longer periods of time really makes them a rock star in the space. Being able to have, multiple days, if not multiple weeks of existence without needing to be recharged because your screen is not an LCD or OLED that's just right. burning battery. That's a really, that's a unique selling proposition that I can really buy into. And you had noted this in a recent episode that we had talked some time ago about an e-ink monitor, a monitor for a computer that was e-ink. And I have to say, at the time, I was really interested in it. And then you mentioned it. And then I went, of course, and started looking for it again. I had to go back in Anything But Idle episodes to look for it and find a link to it. I have to say that it's a really, really interesting concept. And I'm like that close because I have to get a new monitor and do some setup here at my desk. And I'm really quite, interested in the idea of it. Something that's low power. I don't need it to have a remarkable amount of color for the specific use I need. And That's actually really quite unique. Anyway, moving on to our next article this week.
The next is an interesting machine. This is not the first attempt to put more screens inside of a laptop. It's a Lenovo ultra wide 17-inch laptop. But what they did was, instead of put the numpad, they moved the keyboard and the mouse to the side and put a 7-inch screen that you can handwrite inside of that thing. I really like the concept. It means that you take that little tablet in the side with you. That will have make almost consider me a Windows machine. Okay, but they missed that component. But it is interesting, and remind me, that is my daily setup. Okay, I have one iPad with the other one on the side so I can take notes. That is my notebook. So that it was something really interesting, curious for me. What I will have loved to be able to do is take that tablet home so I can leave my desktop or the big laptop in the office and just take the rest.
Yeah, so I brought it up on screen because I just wanted to talk about this a little bit. So we have a 17-inch wide screen. I'm guessing that's diagonally measured. And then you have this kind of basically tablet-sized screen kind of embedded into the side of the machine here. I will note a couple of things that for me, from a productivity perspective, is a drawback. One is I'm actually experiencing this on the Samsung Galaxy Book Pro that I recently bought. I'm experiencing the same problem, and just so that everybody is aware, I've been so used to over the years having a keyboard where the keyboard is centered, and therefore so is the touchpad. And my experience is that I am, in essence, working on the touchpad from the center of the panel. When you have something off to the side, like the Galaxy Book Pro does, which is it has a full numpad, it has a numeric keyboard now off to the side, that pushes the keyboard off to the left a little bit, but it leaves the touchpad, which is rather ginormous, in the center of your typing space, which means your hands are kind of here, but you have to shift them a little bit to the left in order to be typing. And that's not where you're naturally thinking, because you're naturally thinking center screen, center of the keyboard, and typing from there. It's been enough of an issue that it has caused me a little bit of grief. And so I want people to be kind of mindful of that, because the same thing kind of comes into play here. Here on the right-hand side of your keyboard, you have this huge amount of space, which means you've got it on your lap, right? It is a laptop, or even if you have it on desk, but now you looking and being center screen, you now need to shift your arms to the left in order to be able to type straight on. That's weird and uncomfortable over long periods of time, which then means you need to shift the laptop basically to the right, and then avert your gaze to the right in order for you to actually be typing straight on, but to the machine looking off to the right. It's a bit weird. I have to admit, it's a bit weird, and I would say that probably will happen on a device like this also. So just something to be mindful of. If you're taking this device and you're putting it on a surface and you're using an external keyboard and all kinds of other things that might be fine, or you're docking it most of the time and you're only using it for short periods of time when you're off on the road, maybe it's not as much of an issue. But I will say, any of these keyboards with that are shifted, I am starting to feel that sense of like, that's weird. This is a little bit off to the side.
And that is a really valid point, because as you were talking that, I was thinking, okay, yeah, it's true. I have center on the iPad is what is center. So when I go to the side, I'm moving the attention there. But probably you're right. It's all being shifted. Yeah, I can see the awkwardness on that.
Yeah, it is what it is. I don't think it's necessarily something that needs to be. It's not like something you can fix, right? But it's certainly something that if you were going to be bothered by it, you should know that you're going to be bothered by it before you put money into it. So, all right, where are we? We have another story.
Our next one is Tile is working with Lenovo to help find your lost laptop. Apple has been famous with that, and having to find your laptop, find your iPad, find your phone, and now Tile, who was a really strong company, or is a really strong company into the beacons and stuff, it's working directly with Lenovo, so you can have inside of that machine that tile, so you can find them, where they are and all that.
Yeah, I think this is great. My concern here again for Tile is that this technology is being built into devices, and so you have Find My Phone on the iOS platform or the Apple devices, and you have the same thing in on the Android side. And on the Windows, you don't really have that, where Tile potentially can step in, but that seems to be something fairly trivial that once, and I think this is going to be true, once Apple and Android, right now Android is the leader here, Android with Samsung are integrating with your devices, you're going to see more and more of those Android devices connected to the laptops, and therefore maybe extending that capability in that way, right? So I could easily take my Android login, and now with an app running on the Windows device, it can go ahead and find it if it's away. I guess the problem with that, just thinking out loud, I guess the problem with that is that if the device is off or powered down, is that Tile going to work when the device is powered down? And how is that going to run on battery? Is it going to run off the battery on the chip? Is it going to run off the battery from the battery pack, and all of those kinds of things? I think what's the practicalities of me being able to find my laptop wherever it might be, and what's going to be powering that thing? I would imagine that it would last a lot longer than my phone would. In that
and
case.
the batteries is a Tile, at least the separate tiles, they were pretty decent. So
yeah, I'm assuming
they put their own battery for that.
Yeah, but even then, we've had this recent rash of Apple AirTags being used to steal cars. People using them for nefarious purposes. Now all of a sudden we're embedding that kind of technology, not AirTags technology, but a similar technology with Tile into laptops. So
into the corporate laptop.
Yeah, that makes me a little bit, like what else could go wrong here if we start embedding this kind of technology in there? That's not just beyond locating the device when it's on and operating, but when it's not operating and being able to, track people from that perspective. Perhaps just a bit discomforting on that level. All right, moving along to our final bit of technology news, which is that Slack. This is an article from Make Use Of. They are doing a comparison between Slack Free versus Slack Premium. What was your feeling about whether or not you should pay for Slack or not?
I have never been a big fan of Slack. I know some companies love it. I've been forced to use it a couple of times, and it feels like that. So I don't see a reason why to get a Slack. There is missing components for me to Slack. If you are using already Teams, everything, you don't need a Slack. And if you are using Google Meet, you should stay there. The only reason maybe, our company use Zoom and we want something to communicate and we think is great. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Slack.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that being able to, like, for me, the biggest issue with Slack Free is that you're maxed out at a particular number of messages, and then those start to delete. So if there's a historical component to it, like if you want to be able to search beyond that 10,000 recent messages limit, then paying is a necessity. It's not a decision in a lot of ways. Everything else in here is basically a resource limitation, right? It's like features aren't available, file storage hits a limit. I think free Slack goes up to like 5 gigabytes, and then you have to upgrade anyway. So you're going to naturally hit some of these limits, and that's what's going to force you there. I don't feel like any of the features, the paid features, are features that would push you to use a paid plan if you really don't need them. Like, that's just the way in which I think about it. And like I'm in many different Slacks, some paid, some free, and people just basically make the decision to upgrade because they are limited by one of those two things, right? We've reached the number of messages, or we've reached the file storage size. And so I think that is for me the heuristic that I would use. And maybe it's a little too simplistic and maybe not the most strategic, but it's the way in which most people I have been around. And I'm not managing those Slack channels, so I don't really care. But if you do care and you want to make sure you're paying attention to what access Slack has, I would also look at competing tools now at that point, right? Like if you do a comparison against Slack versus like a Discord server, the value of the Discord server versus Slack and what those things are going to do, or say against Google Chat or Microsoft Teams, you're now kind of thinking apples and oranges. And Slack, for better or for worse, is really an outlier in the market, right? They're not part of one of the big tech companies. That makes them valuable to me in a lot of ways because they
are part of Salesforce. That is.
Oh, right. They were bought by Salesforce. Well, forget that then. I'm sorry, but I was thinking to myself, well, they're not one of the big tech, but they actually are now owned by the big tech. Yeah, that's kind of why I think about Evernote, because Evernote is not owned by Apple, Google, Microsoft, or otherwise, right? It's that third party where you feel like at least my data is not held by some large conglomerate. But Slack is now owned by Salesforce. So either way, they are still separate from Microsoft and Google, and that for a lot of people is a way that maybe people want to think about it. But I like to compare apples to apples in that sense, to then see, okay, is Slack comparative in their pro and business and enterprise plans, parallel with what I would get anyway in probably the tools you're already using, which is Microsoft Office, Office 365, or Google Workspace or otherwise. And many times you're not getting that much more for Slack, by paying for it than you're already getting in the built-in tools. And I think that's unfortunate for Slack, but I know they provide a lot of value. But I think that, if you're not already there, then there's no really reason for you to leave one of those other, suites for it. So, all right, that brings us along to our business and finance segment. We've got a couple of articles there. You want to cover those?
Yep. We have the first one is Apple hit the $3 trillion valuation. Wow.
For a moment.
But it's still, 5 years ago, imagine that was not even on the table. So I think is still insane.
Yeah, just for kind of a relative perspective here, Apple has hit the 3 trillion mark. We will see Microsoft hit the 3 trillion mark probably this year also, and we're going to see other companies start making their way toward this, which is remarkable across the board, right? But it's kind of the slow progress that you see happen across all of these large, companies, not just large technology companies. That happens to be the highlight of this particular past 20 years. But we're going to see more and more companies hitting these big numbers because numbers are just getting bigger, right? And so we'll see what happens there. Okay, our other story.
Our second news on the business and finance segment is about Miro. And Miro is an online whiteboarding platform, and they just raised $400 million to continue growing and continue the operation of the business. So it now have a little bit of cash to continue moving forward.
Yeah, and that brings them up to a $17.5 billion valuation. And as I am wont to do in this segment, is to remind people about how much money is really invested in these personal productivity software. And it's just remarkable. $17.5 billion for an online whiteboarding application. Let me be clear about that. It is an online whiteboarding tool, and we're talking 17.5 billion USD. And so across the board, when we think about Asana and we think about all these other tools, there's a lot of big money now invested in making sure those tools stay at the top. And we all have to be just mindful of that as we make our way forward. All right, on to our productivity resources of the week. As Many of you know Augusto and I, we scour the web for all of the various personal productivity articles and so forth that we bring you each week. And of course, in that journey, we come across many tools, apps, and services that we think you might like. And so in this segment, Productivity Resources of the Week, we each bring you one, new or old, we think you might like. And so this week, I came across this from reading some CES news, and it was about the Anchor Work and their product. And I'm trying to bring it up on screen here, and I'm just being not very dexterous in doing so. But it's called the Anchor Work B600, and this is really phenomenal. It is basically a webcam, but it's way more than a webcam in so many ways. It's a bit of a beast. If you look on the page where it kind of describes the product, it obviously is a camera. It's 2K resolution. Not that you need 2K, but it's a 2K resolution. It has dual speakers, and it has a whole bunch of other speakers, microphones on it, so that it can go ahead and reduce background noise. It can isolate your voice and therefore pick your voice up clearly. And it actually has this little light bar on the actual device itself. And so you can see that what looks to me like it's a cover for the actual mic slides up, or somehow, moves up, and it turns on a light, so it illuminates your face, and you have this built-in light into it. So this 4-in-1 design of camera, speaker, mic, and lighting. Now, they are currently running an early bird deal. You can currently reserve an Anchor Work B600 video bar for $1. And if you do that, then it gives you the early bird price on January 25th of $184.99. I'm presuming that's USD. And so that's a pretty good deal. You get $35 off of this very swanky webcam, and so I'm really curious to see whether or not this is a nice device. I'm considering it, and just to see what it's all about, and whether it's a nice device. But you do have to pay the dollar. The dollar is not refundable, and so be mindful of that. But either way, I'm really interested and curious about this. So if anybody does end up getting it, let us know, because I want to hear about it if I don't get one for myself. But even if I do get one for myself, I still want to hear from you all about your experience with it, because it seems like a really interesting, nice device. Yep. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that in the real world. All right, Augusto, what's your resources?
This week I bring in a tool that I don't know why I haven't brought before. So the tool I'm going to talk is simply Apple Notes. It comes with every iOS, Mac. And when Apple Notes came into the market 15 years ago, on the first iPhone, it was really deficient. It didn't have categories. You couldn't do pictures. It was really not a great tool. But Apple have invested in the last 15 years a lot of time and effort into making this a really powerful tool. So as I was talking to a client, we were talking about, well, should I switch to Apple Notes? And I say, wow, I come here with new tools and I have never brought a tool that I really use every day. So I found a couple of articles. One is how and why to switch to Apple Notes. You can use the pencil, you can do everything. It's synchronized automatically with other things. You can put folders, you can share folders. There are many things you can do. And the other one is 13 things you didn't know that Apple Notes app can do. So if you have looked into the Apple Notes and are like, on the fence, I don't know, will this be an interesting tool? The answer is yes. And you can go to these two articles, and hopefully you will get one or two tips or tricks for you to get the most out of the app.
Fantastic. Apple Notes has come a long way, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
All right. That brings us along to our last story, which is our featured story of the week, which is that Google is planning basically to play Apple's ecosystem playbook. You want to explain a little bit about this, Augusto, and we can kick the tires on it?
Yeah, they are trying to get the plans to integrate, the Windows, the Google and the PCs in this case, same as Apple have it today, where I can grab my iPad and will synchronize automatically, will play Simpatico with my other iPad, my phone, or my Mac. And, we've been seeing this with Samsung actually, way before Google made any announcement. In the last two shows that Samsung has done, they have shown how they are trying to integrate. And I'm really glad that Google is going to bring it forward too, instead of wait until Samsung gets all that market share. And I hope HPE and others come and play with that, because I think what make my platform really awesome is I can grab any device and I will have everything, and I can see the apps and I can see everything. That make it really powerful. Regardless the device I have, everything is there. I think Google bringing that to the masses, to the Windows, it is going to be a game changer for everybody.
I think Google would like to do something like that. I'm skeptical Google will ultimately be able to make that work. They are supporting so many OEMs with their software, and at the same time, I'm I'm like I have this cognitive dissonance because I'm really hopeful that Google is going to do this because I want that experience. I mean, for the most part, I have that sense of experience because I install Google products on all of my devices. I frequently talk about my iPad. My iPad is just hardware that happens to run iOS, iPad OS, and everything on it is Google, right? Or some other independent application. I relegate all of the Apple stuff to a folder I literally call unused. And I don't do it.
Not
I don't
only
do it out of
that, for
disrespect. I just I don't
for
use
the
them.
people who listen to the show, I have gotten calls on how can I disappear this thing out of the iPad.
Exactly. I say, Augusto, why is this thing showing up? Can't I just delete it? And that's just my nature, right? Because I am inculcated in Google's ecosystem, right? So I use all of the Google products on my devices. There are mostly apps for everything, and when there isn't, I can use the browser. And so I'm in that space, and so I have a cohesive experience already with this. If Google can make it even better, I'm really excited about that. For example, I do not like the fact that I'm stuck with Siri on the iPad. I would love to be able to replace Siri with the assistant, and I don't think that's ever going to happen, by the way. But but it's
I don't think
nice.
you have a
It's
chance
nice
on
to
that one.
dream. It's nice to dream. But like these are the kinds of things we've already seen parts of that, though, right? iOS has let their guard down, and they have allowed you to choose a default mail application. They've allowed you to choose the default browser, the default calendar. I believe also, I could be wrong on that, but I believe you can choose your default calendar now. So we've seen some inroads into that space. With that, that gives Google an opportunity to say, okay, let's step back and think, okay, we have a Pixel line of products, and from the Pixel phones to the Pixel stand and the Pixel buds and so on and so forth. We have hopefully this Pixel watch coming out in the next few months. Cross your fingers for me. And so I will take this Samsung Galaxy Watch and chuck it out the window as quick as you can blink as soon as that Google Pixel Watch is out. And then you have on the flip side of that, you have the Nest line, and Google has worked really hard to bring the Nest line, which was the Google Home products and everything else like that, under the Nest umbrella, and has been really good at getting that kind of home IoT space organized. If they can make this more cohesive and feel across the board like it works better, that would be really good for all of us. So I don't mean that just for Google users. I think that will be good for the entire industry. It will force places like Amazon to think this through, right? And Amazon does a pretty good job of integrating their tools, but not as good as it could be across the various devices. I find some of the Amazon, items, especially with Madame, a little bit clunky. They could do better, and that's going to force their hand as much. So it means, like you've frequently said, pushing the competition makes it better for everybody.
If everybody will raise, then that is a good thing.
Yes, rising tides lift all ships, in essence. And so I'm actually really pleased to see this. I hope that Google really thinks this through, and it's not just one step in front of us, it's like the next 5 steps in front of me, right? I'm frequently chiding big G for what they have not thought through, not just the immediate question I'm asking it, but the 2 and 3 questions down the road that I'm going to ask it, and not having thought that through. And it's actually rather, in my perspective, simple to think through what I'm going to ask 3 questions down, because Google can, at least the first question down, anticipate my question. You type a couple of words into Google search and it already knows within, a list of 3 or 4 options what question you're going to ask it. So for me to be able to think 2 to 3 questions down the line is not that big a deal, not that difficult once I've already asked a question of it. And so these are the kinds of ecosystem things I want to see Google doing, not just in the assistant side, but in the entire ecosystem, from the UI, from using the what is it called? Material U perspective, and bringing cohesion in terms of a brand language, but also in the way in which the devices work together across ecosystems and how the applications work as well. I want to see more integration between the various app ecosystems. And you've seen a little bit of that with Google Workspace, where now you're seeing more and more of these features of other applications being brought into Gmail or into Google Calendar or otherwise. And so I think we have come to that point where we're going to see a lot more of this happening with Google, and I think that's going to force even Apple to look at how they're making the ecosystem more cohesive for their users. And I think that's actually a good thing. I hope they don't start walling off gardens, though. I hope they don't start walling each other off because of the competition. I hope it becomes a continued space where they can make it better if you choose in their system, but don't lock me out of the system. Don't make my iPad a brick just because I've chosen the Apple device. Don't make me have to use all other Apple devices. I really don't want that. I want all of them to work really well together, no matter what software I want to use on top of them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I wish for the Android users that their Android don't turn into a Windows machine.
On that note, we have reached the end of our show. We have a couple of announcements. If you want to run through those announcements, Augusto, and then we will close out.
Yeah, we have 2 announcements. One is the Momentum Planner that is going to Kickstarter. Kickstarter, they already found it, so they are $4,000 short to their next tier. So the Momentum Planner is being created or developed by the people of Productive Flourishing,
which is Charlie Gilkey.
Correct. So I think it's awesome. They have been working into making this, and again, the more people racing, looking into projects, looking into how to be more effective, then the better we can get and the better we can be. So if you like what Productive Flourishing do, go and check it. Click on the link, check on their Kickstarter, and go with that. Our second announcement is Dr. Frank Buck, who has been a guest here in the show, released his new book, Get Organized Digitally. It's a book, obviously, for education. Dr. Buck talks about education, but I had the opportunity to grab a copy in Amazon, and I've been reading, and I've been enjoying the book very, very much. So I actually had 2 friends who work in education, and a copy of the book was shipped to each one of them. So that's our announcements for the week.
Fantastic. Wonderful. With that, we have reached the end of the show. We've covered the productivity and related technology news this week. So thanks to Augusto Pinaud for putting together the show this and every week. And so thank you, sir. And we will see you next week. Before we wrap up, though, on anythingbutidle.com, you'll find our show notes with links to all the stories, tools of the week. That is our productivity resources of the week. Any extra stories we didn't cover, and text transcripts, both that you can read on the page or you can download as a PDF offline. After looking at the show notes, please let us know if there is a story we missed. You can leave a comment, you can tweet or DM us at anythingbutidle. You can also use our contact form on the website at anythingbutidle.com/contact. If you have a comment or question about anything we've discussed during the show, you can do the same using those same places. And you can also join us in Personal Productivity Club, our online community for personal productivity enthusiasts. There we have a group dedicated to anything but idle. So you can go to anythingbutidle.com/community. And that will take you directly to the sign up page for you to be able to join and enter the group dedicated to anything but idle inside of Personal Productivity Club. All right. If this is your first time watching the live stream, feel free to click the subscribe button. If you're listening to the podcast, you can also come over to YouTube and find the subscribe button, and then you'll be notified when we go live weekly. If you're listening to the podcast, of course, you can also subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and you'll find instructions for that on anythingbutidle.com if you don't know how to. And of course, if you've enjoyed spending time with us today or listening along, feel free to leave a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever podcast app you like. That allows you to go ahead and leave a rating or review. Your compliments really help us reach more of the personal productivity listening community. And so thank you for doing that. And with that, we will see you all next time on Anything But Idle. Here's to your productive life.